Good afternoon, Eastern Washington. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from the capital of free Washington, soon to be Liberty State, Spokane Valley. Brought to you once again by the committee to elect Matt Shea, Republican, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news. It's not about right or left. It's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. It's about not ending in prayer, but moving to action. It's about Ephesians 5:2-5-6. God made us alive together with Christ and raised us up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. If we're abiding in Christ and Christ is abiding in us, all those things. It's a really simple prayer, but all those things that are worrying us, all those things, I put those under the feet of Jesus Christ. It brings a lot of things into perspective when you think about it that way. Now, I talked last time a little bit about fear and how that is kind of changing the dynamic of things. And I want to talk about another aspect of this that I heard over the weekend. And it had been addressed, several times, but I personally think it needs to be addressed head on, and I'm going to do it right now. Let's talk about the 51st state, and people were saying it's divisive, right? And I talked about that last time. But they also said, Matt, it just is never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Now, first of all, that is un-American. We don't defeat ourselves before we even get started. I mean, could you imagine the founding fathers saying, well, that freedom thing, I agree with you in principle on the freedom thing, Matt. Really like to see it happen, but freedom thing is just not going to happen. We wouldn't even have a country if they had that attitude. Well, Matt, there's no way we're going to be able to end slavery. It's just not going to happen. Really? Seriously? Same people would say the same thing about abortion? We're never going to end abortion. It's just not going to happen. What is this defeatism that I'm hearing in the hearts and in the words of my countrymen? Some of my fellow patriots. What is this defeatism? It's just not going to happen. That's not American. That's not what we say. We say, how are we going to make it happen? What are we going to do to make it happen? What do we need to do to make it happen? Who do we need to get on board to make this happen? What do we need as far as resources to make this happen? And as Christians, if we believe what we believe is really real, God could change the world. In fact, he wants to change the world through each one of us. And we just have to ask. It's the corollary to the prodigal son story. You know, the brother who was actually left at home. Nobody really talks about him. He says, where's my feast? Well, I've always been faithful to you. And the point behind that is he never asked. We have got to shake loose this, it's never going to happen. That guy's not electable. This isn't going to happen over here. We've got to stop that. We have got to cut that out of our thinking like a cancer is cut out of the body. There is no excuse for people saying that kind of defeatism is not just un-American, but it's also unchristian. Because if God is calling us to do something and we're already defeated at the beginning, we're not trusting God. And I hope that encourages you and you evaluate your life in those areas in your life. And we've all done it where we said, that just can't happen. I just can't get out of this financial situation. It just can't happen. I can't get out of this situation I'm dealing with a family member, it just can't happen. This job, I just don't like it, and there's no way out of it. There's no way I can get a new job. It just can't happen. That is trapping. It's a prison. You're creating a prison for yourself. Speak life. It can happen. You can get out of that financial situation. You can get a new job. You can resolve that relational conflict in your life. You can. Look I want everybody to stop whatever you're doing right now, unless you're driving. And if you are, maybe you should pull over. But stop what you're doing right now. Just stop what you're doing. I want you to imagine, especially those of you over 40 years old, I want you to imagine back when you were a kid. Imagine back when you were a kid. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, we would run around in the woods all day long in the summertime until my dad whistled for us to come home for dinner. Now, this is, of course, after we did our chores. I remember when I was a kid, I was 6 years old. My parents got me out into the woods. And even though I couldn't do a lot at 6 years old, I could help mark the logs for everybody coming behind with the chainsaws. And then I could haul the little pieces of wood that I could carry. What happened to that America? It's still there if we want it to be. But we have to have that America in our hearts. We have to have that America in our minds before we can see it out everywhere else. Look, Trump can't do this by himself. He can drain the swamp, but there are always going to be alligators, okay? Always. We need to get that heart issue right, to get that mind issue right, to get our heart replaced with a heart from Christ, to get our mind renewed, especially by the Holy Spirit. We need to get ourselves right first, and this defeatist attitude, we need to cut it out. And we need to do it with our family members. Anytime your family member's not speaking life, say, hey, speak life. Don't sound defeated. I'm just being realistic. No, you're not. No, you're not being realistic. Because if you're being realistic, then you're going to trust in God, and anything is possible through Jesus Christ. So you're not being realistic. And I am tired of people saying that's the only argument they have. This just can't happen. The 51st state can't happen. It's already happening. And oh, by the way, if you think that trying to undo 30 years of indoctrination, 50 years of indoctrination, 50 years of communist planning and infiltration is going to be easy, well, you're wrong. It's going to be hard, but it's possible. And it's possible by creating a new paradigm that will render the old paradigm obsolete. That is one of the greatest truths in the Bible. And if you don't understand that, go read the scriptures cover to cover, and it will make sense to you what I'm saying. And that brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing. On the international front, in the Middle East, well, Israel continues to strike Iranian targets. This coming to us from Debka File. Looks like the Israelis have attacked an electronic warfare facility in Syria that was run by the Iranians. Also looks like Pompeo is calling for dramatic sanctions, historic sanctions, I think is the term they're using, against Iran. Also coming out of Syria, this was first briefed by InfoWars a couple of years ago, actually, and now confirmed by Fox News, that indeed, under the Obama administration, weapons that went to Syria ended up in the hands of al-Qaeda. So that is now a fact. Can't be argued by anybody. The policy not just didn't work. And some people say, well, he didn't do it intentionally. Well, it doesn't matter if he did it intentionally. He didn't have the checks put in the system to make sure it didn't happen in the first place, if that's your argument. Or was he intentionally turning a blind eye? I don't know. But I think it bears an investigation. And if you don't believe, by the way, that the level of corruption under the Obama administration that is just coming to light right now could not result in weapons intentionally being sent to al-Qaeda, then you don't understand the problem. Which brings us to a little bit of the national front. Actually, I'm going to wait on that one. Because this is vindicating a lot of things we have been talking about on this show for a very long time. All right, on the international front out of Korea, Trump is casting doubt on this June 12th summit. He's saying, he's kind of, I think, trying to set expectations, saying, quote, there's a very substantial chance that it won't work out. It doesn't mean that it won't work out over a period of time, but it may not work out for June 12th. He also said, I guarantee Kim's safety if a deal is reached, end quote. Apparently, there's also a little bit of issue with John Bolton right now. Kind of driving a hard line on one side, Trump kind of walking back this issue on the other. Also, and this is a very important development too, this just came across the wire here. Israel's security cabinet meetings are now moving to a secret underground facility. That is kind of a preparation for war indicator. So it looks like they're taking precautions. That probably means they're discussing whether or not there should be war with Iran. All right. Also on the international front, mention one last time Venezuela. The New American doing several articles on this. And if you haven't read about the failure of socialism and how money dies and what happens in an oil-rich country in modern times, you should take a look at it. But the last part, to nobody's surprise, Marxist dictator Nicolas Maduro won a re-election to a third 6-year term on Sunday. The former cab driver who learned his politics in communist Cuba said, quote, you have confided in me and I'm going to respond to that infinite confidence, that loving confidence, end quote. After 8,000% inflation over the last year. Yes. And that inflation is actually on path to run at an estimated 13,000%. So, yeah, farcical re-election. Most people saying that it was a rigged election, observers, but this coming to us from the New American once again. They're doing a great job covering this, and anybody can kind of read this and understand, what's happening. I do want to highlight Hungary for a second. Now, I got to tell you, Viktor Orban over there is doing such a tremendous job. If you have not read about Viktor Orban, please do so. He is just on fire over there. He's gone after George Soros in Hungary. And the New American covering this one, Soros subversives flee Hungary as PM Orban shows he's serious about sovereignty. The Open Society Foundation and their chapters, apparently, or their different offshoots, are moving their Budapest-based international operations to Germany, to Berlin. That's rich. So anyway, the bottom line is Open Society Foundation being chased out of Hungary. And it looks like Orban, after winning the election, may be very close to a supermajority there where they can actually do some changes to the constitution in Hungary to ensure these subversives don't ever come back. That's just tremendous. Wow. Chasing out George Soros. Viktor Orban. Great job. If I could give him an award, I would do it. Wonder if he'd ever consider coming to Spokane, Washington. My goodness, what a great job he's doing over there. All right. Also, on the national front, the NSA tripling collection of records of innocent Americans, again, without a warrant. Instead of ramping it down like Congress said and promising that, nope, that didn't happen. They tripled the collection. Also, on the national front, the State Department Inspector General is referring for criminal charges DOJ and FBI officials. This coming after the revelations there was a spy, and there is another revelation apparently, I think I saw this on InfoWars, that there was more than one spy in the Trump campaign, and they're working out the legal approach to being able to talk about this, one of Trump's former campaign people. But there was a spy in the Trump campaign. Lawmakers are demanding a second special counsel to investigate alleged politically motivated misconduct by the Justice Department and FBI officials during the 2016 presidential election. Don't you think? 17 House Republican members introduced a resolution Tuesday calling for the second special counsel. So people are sick and tired of this garbage. And the fact is, if they could do this to the President of the United States, they can do this to any one of us. I do want to mention, too, that it's not going to stop. All right, understand this. It's not going to stop until the whole swamp is drained. So just keep that in mind when you see this stuff, that the whole swamp needs to be completely drained. All right? Also on the national front, DARPA, this kill web, gracious, that they have now come out public with. Look at this. Technology's been around for a while, but they finally admitted that it exists. So I think it's just something we need to keep our eyes on and have that genuine, honest conversation about what the implications of that are and that it should never be used against Americans at all. And speaking of that, you're not going to hear this coming from a lot of other media sources, okay? But this coming from arstechnica.com, very well-respected publication in regards to cyber security issues. I posted this up on Facebook. It should be up on Patriot Radio on the Facebook page. But Americans are tracked by location in real time without a warrant. Guess how? By that personal tracking device all of you are carrying right now called your cell phone. All right, here's how they do it. Prison technology company Securus, using data aggregator 3C Interactive, which uses tracking company Location Smart, they get the cell location data in real time, folks, real time, and then provide that information to the government with no proper verification of a warrant. Ars Technica, has this article, and you've got to read it. So the government is essentially using like a fourth or fifth party and then having that party supply the information without a warrant. Apparently they think that's legitimate workaround. I don't know. But everybody should look at that because it is happening. And for those people that said that doesn't happen, that that's just not true, well, you were wrong, and you need to read the article, okay? Also, on the national front, do want to mention this issue with gun confiscation. I know I've been talking about it a lot, but once again, a sitting Democrat congressman, Eric Swalwell, out of California, calling for confiscation. InfoWars has the story. You can look at it up there. Calling essentially for a ban on so-called assault weapons, confiscation program. They call it a buyback, but it's soft confiscation. And I remember reading a long time ago about how this stuff works. And what they're trying to get people used to is turning their guns in, right? So they essentially groom you into believing that that's okay to turn your guns in. And look, this happened in Holland with the Germans when they swept into Holland during World War II. And I've read several things on it, but one book in particular talks specifically about the first-person accounts of how they did gun confiscation. And then, they first voluntary confiscation, voluntary turn-in, and then mandatory turn-in at a library or a school or a police department, the equivalent to police department back then. And, if you can't imagine that would happen today, of course that's where they're going with this. They've been very clear about this. Very clear. So let's just pay attention to this stuff. Because it's, this is what could really rip America apart. There's a new book out by my good friend Mark Goodwin called Ava's Crucible, and it talks about what happens in 2024. And it's a great kind of mental exercise. What happens in 2024? Do we know? Well, he brings up the case or the idea that, look, in 2024, we're going to be back to where we were 8 years ago at that point, back in 2016, facing the same problem. These communists are not going to go away. They're just not going to go away. And if we think they're going to go away, again, we don't understand the problem. And so this idea of a soft buyback or soft confiscation is just grooming people to be used to it. And so we need to be very clear that this is not going to happen on our watch at all, ever. It will never happen on our watch. Also on the national front, the Boy Scouts. We talked about here last week how the Boy Scouts dropped a boy. Now condoms are going to be required at the the Scouts 24th World Jamboree. Look at folks, if you get your kids out of Boy Scouts, okay? I'm sorry to have to say that. I used to be an assistant scoutmaster. Get your kids out of Boy Scouts. I'll be blunt about it. If you haven't already, get them out. Condoms being required at the Scouts 24th World Jamboree. Condoms! During the 12-day camping event. The founder of the Boy Scouts would be, it probably is, rolling over in his grave. 10 years ago, everybody said, oh, that'll never happen, that these things would devolve this fast. But here they are, right here. Drop boy from the Scouts and then require condoms at the World Jamboree. Wow. Unreal. Absolutely unreal. Okay. Let's talk next about the regional front. I mentioned very quickly about the weather modification stuff that we've been getting. And we went through all, we've got 40 gigabytes worth of documents they dumped on us. This is a typical thing that they do. They try to overload you. Here's a couple things that are very important. First of all, they have made exceptions for local area weather modification, particularly for clearing fog and for fighting fires. Now, you still have to get a notice or provide a notice when you do those operations, even though there's an exception for the actual permit. You still have to do notice. And so we're trying to get a hold of those notices, but they essentially admit that the only true weather modification that has ever occurred at the Spokane International Airport. It was a fog clearing operation. Well, then they exempted out all of those things, fog clearing operations, fire, weather modification. I presume that is just trying to modify the weather to put the fires down. So we're trying to find the notifications for those exceptions and bringing those forward. Okay, one of the other interesting things was this Yale network, which includes the University of Washington, and they were doing weather modification experiments around the country. And one place they were doing this was with the Bureau of Land Management over, guess where? The Bundy Ranch in Nevada. So we're going to get some more information on that. So we've tracked it that far. Anyway, very interesting, them dumping 40 gigabytes of data trying to overload us, but we're getting through it. And those are two things out of it so far that are quite shocking. Nobody else is reporting on this because we're the ones that have it. So just very interesting. All right, also on the regional front, industrial hemp rules are trying to essentially destroy the market here with some of the rules that they're bringing forward. Instead of promoting the market, they're essentially trying to regulate it into non-existence, which is very unfortunate. Very sad about that. If they had taken the legislation the way that many of us had it written, yours truly in particular, we wouldn't be here right now. But they're trying to modify these rules. Department of Ag is here in Washington. They are looking for comments, and they're taking those comments until, I believe, May 25th. So go online, Department of Agriculture, look up the new hemp rules that are being proposed, and go ahead and comment. Also on the regional front, California, truly trying to ban Bibles, and this is what's getting kind of scary. They're using the Consumer Protection Act to say that speech should be regulated under the Consumer Protection Act. Now, consumer speech is speech like an advertisement saying, hey, I want to sell a car. It's not speech about an issue. And definitely wasn't ever supposed to be the Bible. I mean, freedom of religion very clearly protected, which means that the books of those of religion are protected. So the Bible, Christianity, is protected. The first part of the Bible for Judaism, protected. So this application of the Consumer Protection Act means that you could get attorney's fees, get treble damages, a bunch of other things, and this is actually the implication of what they're doing in California. Here's the other interesting part of this. Up in Washington State, on the west side of the state, there was a ruling by a judge to apply the Consumer Protection Act to political speech as part of a campaign. And the argument was, well, you used a commercial source, a vendor, to do that speech, therefore it's commercial speech. That's not what commercial speech meant. It meant you were selling something. Political speech has always been protected for the free and open debate. I might disagree with your speech and what you're saying, but I totally believe in dying to defend that right. You absolutely have that right. So understand the implications of what they're talking about. All right, also on the regional front, this is a big news. You're probably only going to hear it here on Patriot Radio. Regional Forester for Region 6. Okay, that's our area. Jim Pena announces his retirement. He is one of the largest swamp dwellers out there. A huge victory that he is retiring, I believe, as of it's effective as of July 3rd. He's the guy in charge of federal timber supply, and active management. So understand, this was the guy that was creating all the problems in our forests with lack of forest management, lack of access, all of those things. But he is retiring, and I'm going to put retiring in quotes, and that's a gigantic victory for the Trump administration in this area. Jim Pena out as a regional forester for Region 6. And I'm just going to say to whatever members of the Trump administration are out there that listen to Patriot Radio, great job. Also on the regional front, Governor Inslee defending, horrendously actually, Governor Inslee defends the continued slaughter of the unborn. Now, I want you to understand what this means. I want you to understand what this means. He affirmatively defends the ability of somebody to abort their baby because they have Down syndrome, the ability of somebody to abort their baby because they are a woman, a girl. You want to talk about the real war on women? This is the real war on women, Governor Inslee. And he put out a press release defending the slaughter of the unborn. Just unreal. The guys thinks he's going to be running for president. All right, last but not least, on the local front, Red Pill Expo coming up June 21st through 23rd. Also, talk very briefly about the 51st state. Huge response. We have sold almost 200 flags in 4 weeks. It is exploding all over. Folks, if you have bought a flag, take a picture of it and send it into libertystate.org. Just take a picture. And it's been, the response has been amazing. And again, from the people that say this can never happen, it's already happening. People are claiming ground for liberty wherever that flag flies. They're saying, in my heart, in my mind, liberty is there. And now I'm claiming that ground for liberty officially. It's awesome. So keep doing it. We'll keep you updated, too, on what's happening in California. Looks like the secession, that's leaving the Union. We're just talking about splitting the state. Leaving the Union is going to be on the ballot in California. The splitting of California in, I think, 3 states it still doesn't have enough signatures as of yet, but probably will end up with enough. So that is the briefing. And remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. Thank you to everybody that has been praying for us and the show. Please go to Facebook/Patriot Radio US. Like the page, share it with your friends and family. And remember, if you want to keep us on the air, you can go to voteshea, SHEA.com. It's campaign season, folks. It's campaign season. And last week was filing week. It looks like the Democrats have put up candidates against almost everybody. So just keep that in mind. Well, my guest today, and by the way, elections matter, especially on the issue we're about to talk about. My guest today is Steve McLaughlin, who put together the recent cattle summit in Ellensburg, Washington, has been working with a lot of ranchers all over the state. Steve, thanks for joining me on Patriot Radio today, my friend. It's great to have you on again.
Well, thanks for letting me come on and talk to you a little bit, Matt.
So, look, elections do matter. This whole wolf issue is just ridiculous. You know, you have Conservation Northwest out of downtown Seattle trying to dictate policy, but you notice on the map that all the wolf packs are in eastern Washington. Tell the listeners a little bit about what's going on. Tell them a little bit about the summit as well.
Well, starting with the summit, on April 25th, the cattle producers of Washington and the Washington Cattlemen's Association came together for the first time in many years to start taking on an issue together. These 2 organizations have been at odds over a lot of philosophical things and primarily economic. But now we're working together to seek solutions and provide our ranching families with relief to this economic devastation that wolves are bringing to our ranching families and our ranching heritage in this state.
So let's talk about this, okay? Let's talk about this in really plain terms. Conservation Northwest has this nice spiel on their homepage, humans and wolves can coexist in ecological equilibrium, on and on and on. It's just not the reality on the ground. I mean, these wolves are devastating our ranchers. And you know what? I gotta wonder, is that not maybe their intention? I don't know. But it sure seems like it, because they are devastating our ranchers. They are causing massive economic loss. Can you describe for the listeners how this is happening? Because some of it is not intuitive. It's not like you have, this all from wolf attacks as such, but there are some indirect things that happen as a result of wolves being present as well.
Okay, I'm going to start with something fresh, and then I'm going to move on to a cattle sale that should never have happened. But a couple days ago, a gentleman up near Orient, Washington, who runs a very small cattle herd, had a calf depredated by a wolf. And just before coming on your show, I spoke with this gentleman, and he is going to be put out of business by this attack. It is not the job of the state to put people out of business to allow for the reintroduction of an apex predator that never was previously resident in the state of Washington or in the territory of the state of Washington. Secondly, this afternoon I was at a cattle auction with Diamond M Ranch and my very good friends and family at Diamond M. And during that cattle auction, we sold off 143 production cattle at deeply discounted prices that came up during our winter pregnancy checks as open cattle, in other words, not pregnant. And the reason they were open was because these cattle were up in the high country in the Kettle Crest area and Lambert Mountain area, and they were harassed and depredated upon 24 hours a day, 7 days a week during the 2017 grazing season. This resultant loss of production cattle is like shutting down a factory, or at least 20% of that factory. These cattle in that herd, 20% of those cattle in those herds up in that high country last summer came back open. Now, this sale represents the loss to the rancher and his family of well over $1 million in losses over the next 6 or 7 years. And the reason there's so much loss is every cow that was sold today could produce somewhere between 5 and 9 calves each over the next few years. These cattle will no longer be able to produce that, and the rancher takes the loss. Now, ask yourselves, are you willing to take a 20% loss annually in your business if, say, vandals came into your factory and burglarized it, and you had 20% factory losses each year? That is what the animal rights activists and the environmentalists and the Department of Fish and Wildlife are attempting to do. They are attempting to put these guys out of business. And it's not just Conservation Northwest. It is my belief that the Department of Fish and Wildlife is being very economical with the truth about what's going on. And it is time to call them out for what they are.
Economical with the truth. I don't know if I've heard that before. Oh, well, so here's kind of the frustration for me. They don't seem to want to count these numbers of losses, even though, like, correct, for example, in forestry, you cut one tree down wrongly or one tree burns and they factor it out 3 generations. They recognize this in forestry, but they're not recognizing this in ranching. Why do you think this is happening?
Well, one of the things is we on the cattleman side have not been providing data to allow for decent decision making. And one of the weapons that we have in our toolbox now is a data collection tool that shows percentages of open cattle per rancher across the state, and those starting with those areas where depredation is going on. And we intend to have that data processed and looked at and studied in an open and honest and a scientific means of production to ensure that the data is accurate. And if we stand on the truth and we stand on good data, we can start to turn this battle around. And suffice it to say, it is a war on ranchers. And it's time to stop it, and it's time to go on the offense. And that is my intent, to take us on the offense.
So, collecting data. I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's very, very important because it can show very demonstrable losses. But one of the things that I've seen, too, is, there have been just very clearly, even for people that are not experts, clearly wolf attacks that have not been attributed to wolves. And, because of that, it looks like less attacks are actually happening. And in addition to that, how they determine what a pack is also seems to skew data. Can you describe some of those things that are occurring and maybe some of the solutions to that as well?
I sure can. The first thing, last summer, I took a 5-state swing: Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Oregon. And I spoke to wolf leads in some of those states, and I studied the problem in each of those states. And for every wolf confirmed depredation, there are, on average, 7 other depredations by wolves that we never find. And so if we can, tell those numbers for what they really are, and the way we do that in our data collection tool is every time we turn cattle out onto either private or public lands, ranges, we record cattle turned out, and we record cattle turned back in at the end of the grazing season, and we look at potential predation based on where the wolves are. The second thing that is happening here is we're taking a look at these open percentages, which adds another layer of economic loss that has so far not been discussed or fought over. So we're working on that piece as we speak. The other problem that we have is the Department of Fish and Wildlife is very hesitant to do and confirm a wolf kill. If there's any doubt in their mind whatsoever, they don't confirm the kill when it's basically pretty obvious. What I'd like to see is I would like to see local control. And we're experimenting with that right now in Ferry and Stevens County with the hire of a special deputy that can go out and help ranchers and work with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to make confirmations more really transparent and to have a faster response. And one of the problems that we have is the department is going to be curtailing its GPS tracking of these wolves, and so it's going to be virtually impossible to know where they are. But suffice it to say, right now, the wolves are attacking in the low country in those 2 counties. So we want to be really cautious of that. And unfortunately, I feel that there's going to be some public safety issues that come out of this as well. The second thing I think that we need to take a look at is what is really going on in terms of what the department is saying. They are playing a shell game with the naming of wolf packs. For example, many of you have read about the Profanity Peak Pack several years ago. Well, a couple of years ago, that pack was renamed the Sherman Pack. And last summer, the department took out the single collared wolf in the Sherman Pack. And now the Sherman Pack just recently was renamed the Togo Pack. So tell us about the shell game that is being played with these various packs. And the reason the department is doing this is so that so each pack does not reach a threshold that would generate the need for the department to go out and conduct control operations to reduce wolf numbers in the pack, or in the best case, eliminate the pack in total terms. In other states, in Wyoming in particular, if a wolf pack attacks a cattle herd, the Department of Fish and Wildlife in Wyoming eliminates the entire pack, thus eliminating the problem altogether. Yet wolves continue to thrive and survive in Wyoming. But, if we can teach wolves to be afraid of humans, and non-lethal deterrents don't work, and we know they don't work. And if they do, it's only for a very short period of time. If we can eliminate wolf packs from preying on cattle by making them afraid of human activity, and making them afraid of what would happen, and this can be done, I think, that would go a long way in reducing the problem.
Well, let's talk a little bit about these non-lethal means. So the wolves get smart. I mean, it's not like they're dogs, for goodness sakes. Dogs are constantly adapting to their surroundings and learning, what or what not to do. I mean, this is natural. That's what wolves do too.
All I want to do is say, ha, 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 ha. The non-lethal deterrents are not working. The Range Rider program that is one of the pet projects of Conservation Northwest is merely a way for people to go into wolf country knowing GPS coordinates of wolf packs in order to find cows and calves that have been depredated upon. It is merely a way to record your demise. A couple weeks ago in the Capitol Press, I saw a story of an Oregon rancher who's flagging his ground, and I just had to laugh to myself. That deterrent will last about 15 minutes until the wolf figures it out. And so the non-lethal stuff is not working. The Range Rider program is not working. The only thing that I believe is going to work is going to be control. And, just recently, one of my known adversaries, the Center for Biological Diversity, had a lawsuit dismissed. But in order, as part of the compromise, the Department of Fish and Wildlife said and promised that they would give everybody 24 hours notice prior to conducting any control operations. And all that does is gives the animal rights activists that 24 hours to go to court and seek a restraining order against the depredation or against the control measure. And so what good is it going to do? What we need to do if a wolf preys on cattle or domestic stock, and ultimately it's going to prey on humans, a one-day delay to allow the courts to grant restraining orders against the wolves isn't going to cut it. And so we need to figure out a way to stop that from happening.
So ultimately, how do you see this? I mean, because people are going to, they're always going to try to make the argument, you have been at war over the wolves for years. You ranchers just need to get used to it. Wolves are not going away. Cattle are not going away, obviously, either, although you never know the way that these policies are actually devastating the industry. How do you convince folks in downtown Seattle that, hey, we really need to take another look at this when that attitude is out there?
Well, one of the things we're trying to do is educate people on the west side in Washington State. In Liberty, I think we're in pretty good shape. But in Washington State, it appears to me that it's going to have to be some significant public education that takes place to expose the truth. Remember, the stories that you read in Ranger Rick magazine when you were a kid about how wonderful the wolves are is simply not the truth. The wolf is an apex predator. It eats its prey alive, and it separates its prey from the rest of the herd or from its caretaker, if you will, say if it's a mother, and it will eat that calf alive. And it will, before it eats it alive, it'll nip at it and drive it into a deep, dark, terrible place so that the wolf can be unencumbered in, its final kill. And by communicating some of the actual facts about wolves the fact that and some of the economics of loss of cattle as a result of wolf depredation, and the emerging public safety threat that is going to happen with wolves, maybe then we can start making some headway. But, the bottom line is it's going out and it's just beating the drum loudly and getting the facts together and then attacking and holding the Department of Fish and Wildlife accountable for their interruption of commerce and their interruption of ranchers and others to do business. Another thing we need to do is an ungulate study to show that the reason wolves are moving into the low country now is because they've wiped out deer, elk, and moose populations in those areas where they're, pretty thickly saturated. Yep. And so, a wolf is going to do what a wolf's going to do. It's going to go seek a protein source, and if it's already killed all the deer, elk, and moose, what's it going to turn to next? Cattle or sheep. And we've had ranchers in both industries, cattle and sheep, that have been severely burdened. And is it not the state's job to help enable commerce rather than to destroy it? I would ask, you, the listeners. And it's time to stop this. And what we need is everybody that's listening to start writing to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, writing to your legislator, and demanding that we come up with an active wolf management and control program to ensure that the rancher is able and the ranching family is able to continue in their small business endeavor. And by the way, public lands grazing, contrary to what the environmentalists will say, is healthy for the environment. And in fact, BLM has even said so recently. So it's healthy for fuel reduction. It's healthy for aquifer regeneration. It's healthier for soil. And so let's do what has to be done, and let's do the right thing. And,
all right, let's talk. We got 2 minutes left. So first of all, I want to make sure that you get the opportunity to direct people where they can go to learn more information out about this. But I would want to ask a question, and one of our listeners actually just texted this, and I totally agree. I was kind of going there in my mind already. But how would this affect the normal property owner? How does this affect the normal property owner, the average property owner, and how would this affect the city dweller? I mean, I don't think they understand where hamburger comes from. So how would this affect those folks?
Well, Matt, hamburger comes from Safeway or Burger King. And what we need to do is we need to reinforce in people's minds that beef is a necessary food source for our health. The food supply in the United States is a key resource that should be protected, and beef is one of those resources that should be protected. And so, what you would see, at the dinner table, if you do eat beef, which I think is what's for dinner, we need to educate the public that if you want to have good low beef prices of U.S. safe beef, then you have to help the ranchers to be able to continue to market beef at a low price. The second thing, in terms of what is happening, just this past weekend over in Washington State, there was a cougar kill of a person, and if you think that a cougar kill is bad, just wait until the wolves start saturating populated areas, which they already are. In the Deep Lake area near Northport, there is a wolf pack that has been operating in a pasture less than a half mile from a neighborhood on that lake. It's only a matter of time before somebody gets taken out. As far as a resource to look at, a book that I strongly recommend is a book called The Real Wolf by Ted Lyons and Paul Graves. Ted Lyons is an attorney. Paul Graves is a wildlife biologist who studied the impact of wolves in Russia extensively and knows what happens with human-wolf interaction. The second resource is to look up the 7 signs of wolf habituation to humans by Professor Emeritus Valerius Geist. And there is a chapter by Geist in the Real Wolf book. And there is a website, realwolf.org. And, meanwhile, those folks that know who I am or know how to get a hold of me through you or any other way may always feel free to contact me directly so that I can, provide you with the resources that they need. But look at, the website realwolf.org and know the truth. Because what you've been hearing from the animal rights folks isn't necessarily the truth.
Steve McLaughlin, thank you very much for your work putting together the summit. I know it wasn't just you. There were a lot of people that were involved with the cattlemen and cattle producers, but it was great to see everybody in the same room agreeing on the way forward. And I just appreciate everything that you've done in the defense of freedom and liberty. We'll have you back on again over the summer to get an update, my friend.
Thank you, Matt, and God bless.
God bless you, too. Steve McLaughlin talking about cattle and cattle ranchers under fire, and especially with this whole wolf issue. And it's so interesting to me, again, that all the packs are on our side of the state, right? But Conservation Northwest and some of these other groups in downtown Seattle think that they best know how folks in eastern Washington, the proposed state of liberty, should live. Here's the other interesting part about it, too. Share with your friends in downtown Seattle where hamburger actually comes from. It doesn't come from Safeway. It doesn't come from Fred Meyer. It comes from our cattle ranchers, ultimately. And if they want cheap beef prices, like Steve was saying, they got to be paying attention to this. And really want to give a shout out to the folks at the McCurvin Ranch and just what a wonderful family they are. Just really awesome folks. And I know they're listening. God bless you guys.